Well, it's a great pleasure on Dashing Dan's Sporting Adventures to get the boss of the AFL for KISS Professional Solutions, another Xavier boy, John McEncrow, and I'm speaking to a Xavier boy, and I'm a Xavier boy as well. So it's full of old Zavs here for KISS Professional Solutions, www.kissps.com.au, and you can get them on 1300 547 777. Andrew Dillon, welcome to Dashing Down Sporting Adventures. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Dan. Been looking forward to it for a while.
Oh, I really appreciate that. Look, you've got a lot on your plate. How much of a challenge has it been over the last 18 months since you took on the top job?
Oh, look, it's a big organisation. It's a massive game. Lots of moving parts, Dan. But I've said it a few times. It's a big responsibility, but also an absolute privilege to be in a role where you're having stewardship over a game that means so much to so many people.
Has it helped that you've been at AFL House for 20 years, that you sort of knew the machinations of how it all worked, that it's been much easier for you than, when I say easier, less of a challenge than if you had have walked in from another organisation?
Yeah, look, I think so. I don't think anything would actually necessarily has you set for a CEO role, but your experience obviously counts. And I think my time at the AFL has certainly meant there are parts of the role that have probably come easier than what they would have otherwise, but it's also not a given. So there's lots of challenges, but they're all, as I said before, it's a great privilege to be there. But my time at the AFL, I've seen a lot, and I think that experience has certainly helped me in the first 18 or so months.
Was it frustrating that it took a long time for the commission to appoint you? And if you hadn't have got the job, would have you walked away?
Oh, no, for the first part. And look, it wasn't something that I ever really contemplated, Dan. I've been at the AFL since August 2000, so it's been a big part of my life. I think working in the industry, as I say, it's a real privilege. So it wasn't something I ever really contemplated, to be honest.
Because you're a lawyer, of course, and then you started working for Village Roadshow. Did you find working in big corporations in the legal side more of a challenge for you than working for a law firm?
It was different. I think that working in the law firm sort of straight out of university was a great experience, but then working in the corporate side, probably get a lot more responsibility. I certainly did then. So that was a really great learning experience for me, sort of in my late 20s, to be at Village Roadshow and have a fair bit of responsibility as a lawyer there. They were two good places to work, and they helped set me up for when I started at the AFL as the legal counsel back in 2000.
Now we organised this interview 3 weeks ago, and of course I got bumped. I'm more than happy to get bumped because it was a big day, and you announced some changes to your senior management. Greg Swan coming in, and of course Tom Harley is second in charge. Greg in charge of football. Why did you feel, Andrew, you needed to make those changes?
Oh, look, I think that there's a couple of parts to it. One was, I think it's really important at the AFL to have club experience within the AFL. The clubs as such, they're so important to the AFL. They're actually, they're ultimately the members of the AFL, and it's the fans of the clubs that are the ones that drive the game. So having people in senior roles within the AFL who've been at a club, understand how a club works, I think is really important. It's also important then to have people with different backgrounds. And I think that's now I've got an executive team where we've got a really good spread of people, and Tom and Greg with their time in the game. Greg is a CEO at 3 clubs over 25 plus years, and Tom, a premiership captain, played for an expansion club. He played his first game for Port Adelaide, which I think a lot of people don't remember. Spent some time in game development at AFL New South Wales, and then has been at the Swans for I think a bit over 10 years now in a couple of roles. So Greg and Tom bring vast experience to the AFL and to the AFL executive, but also they're great football people with values that will absolutely fit in with what we're trying to do here.
In regard to the on-field, and Greg, as you say, has got a lot of experience in that particular area, what do you think is the biggest issue that'll be confronting him when he starts that role in a few weeks' time?
Well, I think, look, it's a role that the football performance it's the part of the footy operations that has the most passion around it. You're looking after umpires, you're looking after the laws of the game, you're looking after the player movement, you're looking after the MRO and the tribunal. So I think the all of those are challenges, but they're also great opportunities. And I think that's where someone like Greg can bring the experience that he's had at, 3 different clubs, as I said. It's just a different way of looking at things. And I think so all of them they're all challenges because of the passion that surrounds them. And we've got a competition that is so equal, so competitive that every decision has big ramifications. And I know Greg's acutely aware of that.
Is concussion one of the biggest issues, considering mental health? And in regard to that, do you see a mental health round becoming a permanent part of the AFL fixture down the track? Not just, and we know how important it is, Danny Frawley's game, of which St Kilda's heavily involved in?
Well, player safety at all levels of the game, AFL, AFLW, all the way down to, not all the way down, but and then from Oz kick up and everything in between is an absolute priority for us. And so, brain health, super important for the AFL. And we have a big team that works on that, invests substantial amounts in research. We've just started a project, a longitudinal study over 10 years, which will involve all AFL and AFLW players. We're piloting it with Geelong and Sydney this year, and then we'll expand it to all of the other clubs from next year. So that's an absolute priority for us. In relation to mental health, again, a big focus for the AFL. We've got a mental health area that's got over 35 people working in it through our talent pathway programs, working in with our clubs. Again, a big focus for the AFL. In terms of a mental health round, I think that's one where we will talk to the experts. We've got a partnership with Headspace. We also work very closely with the Black Dog Institute in Origin. And the view from those experts, or the consensus, is that at this stage, what it's best for the AFL to work on is actually our work in the community and at the clubs. It may at one stage be a mental health round, but it may not be. And I think what Spud's game does, and we've actually got a lunch for it's sort of as part of Spud's game this afternoon, where we'll be at that. And that's something that the AFL has worked with St Kilda on.
In regard to being the figurehead, do you feel comfortable in that role, Andrew? Do you feel comfortable with the media? You're more comfortable the longer that you've started being involved in this role. Is talking to the media something that comes naturally to you? And if not, how have you managed to become better at it over the last 18 months? Because that's a big part of the role, isn't it?
Yeah, look, I'm not sure anyone's natural well, some people are maybe, but I think what's important is that when you are talking, you know what you're talking about. And I think I'm certainly getting better at that. And then I think the more you do anything and the more you practice it, then the better you get. But I think with anything you do, it's all about preparation. So as long as you're prepared, you know what you're talking about, and you know who you're talking to and what messages you want to deliver, then I think that's the important part of it. And then whether I'm good at it, whether I'm getting better at it, well, then that's for others to judge. But I find my interactions with the media, I think they're always respectful on the other side, and I enjoy the opportunity to talk with people about what we're doing at the AFL. It's really important for us here to be able to have that direct line into our fans so that we can explain what we're doing here, why we make the decisions that we make.
Do you ever get annoyed that they seem to know everything that's going on, maybe even before some of the executives of certain clubs? I mean, some of the great journos have got the information and they're hardly wrong, are they?
Well, I mean, again, that's for others to judge. But what I do know is that there's a lot of interest in and around the AFL. And I see that as an absolute, that's just something that's important for the AFL. It's because there's so much interest, or that's why there's so many journalists employed in and around the game, because people want to read about it. They want to devour every bit of information. And I think that's an absolute competitive advantage for the AFL, is that we have so many fans and so many people who are so interested in so many parts of our game. So whether it's not really frustrating, it's like sometimes you would prefer that you could get the information to the CEOs first, but I think that's all part and parcel of the industry.
CEO of the AFL, Andrew Dillon, has been good enough to join me on Dashing Down Sporting Adventures for KISS Professional Solutions. You can get them, being the largest independent provider of copiers and printers in Victoria, on 1300 547 777. If Greg Swan and Tom Harley said no to the roles that they've taken on, did you have a plan B, Andrew?
Always got a plan B and a plan C, Dan, but there's lots of very capable people in our industry, and I spoke to some really talented people about those roles. But I'm super stoked to have Tom and Greg joining us. You know, Greg's starting on the 21st of July, and Tom will see out the rest of the season with the Sydney Swans, and will join the men's season. Will join us early October. So I'm looking forward to having them both on board.
Absolutely. Before I get to community footy, which is certainly something you're very interested in, I need to ask you about Tasmania. Is the roof on the new stadium, is that non-negotiable?
It's a condition. It was a clear component of the bid from the Tasmanian Task Force, and it's a condition of the license. And I think it's super important for the team, but for the economics of the stadium to work, having a roof makes it a lot more attractive for other users, and that was an important part, and that's why it was part of the component of the bid from the task force, is that for the stadium to be economical, it needs that cover, because that opens it up for a whole host of other events. It'll be, the Devils will play a number of games there, but it'll be a stadium that'll get used hundreds of times a year, and having the roof there absolutely adds to its versatility and the ability for it to be used 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year.
So how concerned are you that there's obviously been a vote of no confidence in the Premier, Jeremy Rockliff, and they're going to have an election which will put back the voting in Tasmania of the stadium, that it may mean the team is either delayed or doesn't get off the ground without the approval of the stadium, as you said, which is a very important part of why Tasmania will get a team?
Yeah, look, that's been, the planning process has been ongoing for a number of months. The election in a couple of weeks' time, that will be what it'll be. But what we do know is that both the Labor and Liberal parties are proponents of the stadium, and they will be, and the first part of business that they'll do, whoever forms government, will be to bring in the enabling legislation. So it fits within all the timelines that we had when the license was granted back in May 2023. So ultimately, the election is an issue for all of Tasmanians, and that will play out. But I'm really confident that the enabling legislation will pass, and we'll be back on track and looking for a 2028 start date for the Devils.
Just one more on this. I mean, you wouldn't be surprised, you know all about it, but are you annoyed, Andrew, for want of a better expression, that the North and South divide seem to get involved in something that'll be absolutely fantastic for a state like Tasmania, which has got a magnificent heritage in football, as we all know?
Yeah, look, I don't necessarily buy into the North and South. I mean, maybe it's there on other things, but I know with the Devils, they've got over 200,000 foundation members, and over 120,000 of them are from Tasmania, and they're from all parts of Tasmania. And I think the Devils, like the
Jack
Jack Jumpers before them, Jack Jumpers, and like the Hurricanes in the BBL, they will unite all of Tasmania, and the Devils will be no different. And I think it's been great to see the success that those two teams have had in basketball and cricket. And I've got no doubt that in time that the Devils will come in and they'll be competitive, and they'll be great to, go down there and watch them play down at the new Hobart Stadium, but also they'll be playing a number of games up at UTAS Stadium as well, which is already undergoing a substantial redevelopment as we speak.
Was it a little bit concerning or even disconcerting last Friday to see a game there, Hawthorn and Adelaide, how cold it was? And does that sort of ratify the reason why you need a roof?
Oh, look, I don't know whether that game was, that game was played. It was, the Hawks had a good win. It was a pretty close match, but ultimately, the decision on the stadium in Hobart. That was sort of first came up in 2018, 2019. So it's been on the table for a long time.
Now, Andrew, community football is very close to your heart. You played 290 games for the Old Xavs. You played in 6 consecutive premierships, which is an amazing performance between 1995 and 2000. You happy where it is at the moment? And what do you think needs to change for it to get better?
Community footy overall, really happy with where it's at. We've got participation around the country at record levels, but I think there's always hot spots, and there's always things that can be better. So what's important at the AFL is that so if I go back a bit, one of the great responsibilities and the privileges at the AFL is not only the responsibility for managing the elite AFL and AFLW competitions, but unlike some other sports, the responsibility for grassroots footy and community footy sits with the AFL. And I think that's, again, an enormous advantage for the AFL to be able to bring those two together. Our commission has recognised that, and back in August 2022, resolved that at least 10% of industry revenue would now be invested into community football each year. So that allows our game development team to invest into community footy to make sure that we've got as good a competitions as we can have, but also environments where people can come together and be part of something bigger than themselves. But also then look at different ways of playing the game, investing into facilities to make sure that all of the popularity of the sport and the number of boys and girls and men and women who want to play, that we've got the facilities that can house all those people who want to play. That's one of the biggest issues we face. It's a great issue to have, is actually the facilities. And so the investment in change rooms, the investment in lights, the investment in upgrades and surfaces, which allows our current facilities to be used more so that more boys and girls and men and women can play. So yeah, we're in a really good space, but it's an area where we want to continue to increase the number of opportunities for people to play. It's such a great game.
In regard to senior community footy, would you like to see more leagues that are close to each other location-wise, geographical-wise, have what they have at the amateurs, which is very successful, and they have what they have now at the league I'm involved in, the MPFNL, which is divisional football? How important would that be to ensure they all survive?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Dan. And I think what's important is that I think the lifeblood of any community is the clubs. And then ultimately the leagues are where the clubs come together to play at the best way possible. So I think the amateurs is a great competition. The Mornington Peninsula League are great, but we've got some really historical and big metro leagues as well. So I think what's important is that whatever happens there, that we're just making sure that we've got the best environments for our clubs to be able to find a way to compete. Because I think, if you look through the scores on a weekend, the one thing you don't like seeing, because I don't think you want to play in them, is where there's big mismatches. So if maybe bringing leagues together so you can get that, you can find the right level. I think that's important to do, but it's doing it in a way where everyone comes along and you're making the decisions for the right reasons. But ultimately, what I want is for as many people to play, and if that's having environments where they're bigger leagues with divisions, then I'm all for that. But it wouldn't be just
a couple more questions, if I can, Andrew. Any downtime, or is it a 24/7 job? And I know your lovely wife Amanda would love to spend more time with you. Do you get that opportunity, or is it just? Or does she realise that this is just what this job is at the moment?
Oh, look, I think I've said it a few times, so it's a privilege. I mean, ultimately, a lot of my work is going to the footy. So I get to go to Geelong and Brisbane tomorrow night for work. I'm fortunate enough to be going out to the Longwood Footy Club to talk at their pre-game on Saturday Arvo. So I think if I wasn't working at the AFL, I'd probably still be watching heaps of footy and going to heaps of footy anyway. But it's a job that's really important. And what I find and what I really enjoy is actually getting out and going to the footy, whether it's a community footy game or an AFL game, and being able to speak to fans, speak to presidents of clubs, speak to CEOs and others to find out what's going on at the coalface.
What are your cricket skills like? Because you're married into a famous cricketing family. Paul Sheehan played 31 tests for Australia, averaged 33, Shield average of 46. many good matches in the backyard, and were you able to play well against him, Andrew?
No, look, I haven't. He doesn't talk a lot about his cricket days. You've got to sort of try and extract that out of him. But no, my cricket skills are few and far between, Dan. I actually quite like the game. I like watching it, but it wasn't really one of my go-to sports.
And you married a twin. How long did it take for you to be able to recognise Amanda from Sarah? Because I believe they are identical. Is that right? If you don't mind me asking.
They are identical. I think I've only confused them twice, Dan, and it was all very understandable. And I realised the error of my ways very quickly. But I do spend a lot of time together. Yeah.
Absolutely. A couple more, if I may. Where would you like to be in 5 years, and where would you like the game to be in 5 years?
Well, where I want the game to be, I want to. So where will we be? 2030. I think we'll be playing in a new roof stadium at Macquarie Point. I reckon we'll be a few games in now. We'll be well on our way to 1 million participants, and I think we'll be well on our way to 10 million people coming to the AFL games, AFL and AFLW games in a year, and we'll have gone hopefully from our 1.4 club members to over 2 million club members. So that's really what we're looking to focus on. Is we want more people coming to our games, more people being attached to their clubs, because as I say, our fans just love their clubs. They're attached to the clubs, and we want more boys and girls and men and women playing. So the 10 million attendees, 2 million club members, and 1 million participants, that's where I'd love to be in 5 years' time. And if we're not quite there, we'd want to be well on the way.
Will we have a 20th team? And if so, where will that be? Canberra or Northern Territory?
Look, I think as we talked about earlier, Dan, there's still a fair bit of work to do down in Tassie, and that's going to occupy a lot of my time and my team's time over the next few years. But I think once we get that better down, we will begin the work. Well, the work will happen. I think there's a lot of interest around the country for the opportunity to be the 20th licence, and whether that's the NT, whether it's Canberra, whether it's another team from New South Wales, Queensland, SAWA. I think there'll be a lot of interest, and not sure about when the timing of that will be, because Tassie's our absolute focus at the moment in terms of expanding the comp.
And will you know when it's time to go, Andrew? I mean, Andrew Dimitrov was in for about 10 years, Gil in just under 10. I mean, is a 9 to 10 year period long enough to be CEO? I mean, you don't know that yet, but it's a big job, as you've said.
Yeah, look, I'm sort of coming up to 2 years in, Dan, really enjoying it. But I think what I want to do is just continue to make a contribution to what I feel is, what I know is the best game in the world. And I just want to continue to progress the game and leave it in a better spot than where I found it. And I think there's, when I was lucky enough to get the role. So lots of challenges, but so many opportunities for us. And I think, one thing we probably haven't touched a lot on, but the opportunity for the game with AFLW, I think, is untapped. And that's we've got a lot of focus on that for the next sort of 3 to 5 years as well.
Just quickly on that, seeing you brought it up, I know you've got another meeting to get to, and I really appreciate your time. Do you think we got 18 teams up a little bit too quickly in AFLW and it sort of diluted the talent, or are you happy where it is at the moment?
Yeah, look, it's a good question, and I don't know. The talent that's coming into the competition is extraordinary, and we'll continue to see so many first choice athletes coming into our sport over the next 5 to 10 years. So I'm not concerned about the talent at all. And ultimately, we didn't have a choice to go to 18 teams because all our clubs wanted to be in. And if it was a bit early, I'm more than comfortable with that, because I think that actually sets us up to be in a better position in 5 or 10 years. To have the opportunities for 540 female athletes to be playing and getting better, doing the pre-seasons and providing opportunities for the teenage girls to look up and say, well, here's an opportunity for me that I can see and that's real. I think there's nothing better than that, because I think what you want is just to provide hope. And I think that's what the W does for girls, young girls and women, to be able to have an opportunity to play a game that they've probably always loved. And what we're seeing now, though, is girls starting at Auskick and then having an uninterrupted pathway all the way through to AFLW, including the opportunity now for a coach league program that's the equivalent of what the boys get, or a Northern Academy program that's the equivalent. So that's why I've got no concerns about the talent. It's just going to continue to come in droves.
And if I may, I spoke before about community footy, and of course, there's no free-to-air television at the moment as part of the current broadcasting agreements. On Saturday night, of course, is the big issue. We don't have it, of course, during the day Saturday. Does that help community footy, Andrew, do you think? I know, speaking to a lot of people, they're quite happy about that. I mean, there are some that obviously have paid television and watch it, and the footy clubs have it as well, but there are many that don't, and I think that's helping with the numbers going to the games.
Yeah, look, yeah, potentially it does, Dan. But what I do know is that what's really important from an AFL point of view is that we remain a game that's accessible. So this 7-year broadcast deal that we're now sort of 13 or 14 rounds into has the same number of games on free TV than we've had the last 10 years. It's just a slightly different configuration. And what we have heard, particularly over the last number of years from our fans, is that Thursday night footy is really important. And so when we were having the chats with Channel 7 and KO Foxtel during the last rights deal, Thursday night footy was really important for Seven. The games had to come from somewhere, and that was what was agreed. And what we do have now is a really consistent calendar of footy: Thursday night, Friday night, Sunday 3:20. If you're in Victoria, for free to air, and then 11 marquee games. And then for those that want access to all 9 games, KO or Foxtel, which are affordable. So I think we've got great coverage of our game. We've got great broadcast partners. And if one of the, I think it would be an unintended one, but I think ultimately we just want people to then, if they're not watching at the elite level, connecting at community. And for me, that's as important.
Andrew, we could talk forever, but you've got a lot on your plate. I really appreciate you giving me half an hour's time. It's been great chatting. You're doing an outstanding job, but it's wonderful to see an Old Xavier boy who I knew really well at school, one of the nicest guys I've met, get the top job and do a great job with it. I appreciate your time. Good luck in the future, particularly with Tasmania. And I thank you for joining us on Dashing Down Sporting Adventures for KISS Professional Solutions. And you can get them on 1300 547 777. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me on. See ya.